Kane Morgan, at 54, never imagined the day would come. After 17 years, we're eliminating your position, Martin said flatly, barely meeting Kane's eyes. Clear out your desk by the end of the day. The words landed heavily, but Kane simply nodded. Years of dedication to Atlas Innovations in Hartford, Connecticut, erased with a single, indifferent sentence. Kane had been the backbone of the IT department since the dial-up era. From data recovery to cloud migrations, 3 CEOs had come and gone while he remained, training new hires, fixing what was broken, ensuring that Atlas kept running smoothly. He worked through weekends, holidays, late nights, never asking for a raise or recognition. When Martin called him into the office, with Laura from HR already seated, Kane knew. He'd sensed it weeks ago, the change in the air, the whispers in conference rooms that would suddenly stop as he passed. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply nodded and walked out without a word. At his desk, younger employees stole glances his way, then quickly returned to their screens. News traveled fast. Most of them were coders he'd trained himself, good kids, but unaware of the deeper architecture Kane had built into Atlas's systems. They knew how to code, but they didn't understand the veins and arteries of the company's digital heart. Kane had written custom software, secured backdoors for emergency recoveries, and buried admin credentials 3 layers deep in every critical system. These were things he never documented. Not fully. Some knowledge was better kept in his head. He began packing his things. A family photo, a coffee mug his daughter Sophie had made in high school, and a small cactus that somehow survived 17 years under fluorescent lights. Bethany from marketing stopped by, her expression tight with concern. Kane, I just heard. This is ridiculous. You practically built this place. Kane shrugged. Companies change, he replied simply. But without warning, after everything you've done. Her voice rose, drawing attention. It's fine, he said quietly, cutting off further protest. It wasn't fine, but he wasn't about to make a scene. He was past that. As Kane was leaving, Martin stepped out of his office to watch him go. No handshake, no farewell, just surveillance, ensuring the departure was final. Kane didn't look back. Outside, Kane sat in his car for a moment, staring back at the 12-story building where he had spent nearly 2 decades of his life. His security badge, surrender at the front desk, had been renewed 16 times. He started the engine and pulled away, his mind already working through what came next. They had no idea what was coming. Wednesday would be interesting. Kane had been with Atlas since it was just 2 floors in a modest business park. He'd started. 5 years ago, Martin became his boss, a young MBA with grand ideas about efficiency and digital transformation, spouting buzzwords that meant doing more with less. At first, Kane tried to help him understand the complexity buried under Atlas's growth and adaptation. We need to future-proof, Martin would say in meetings, looking right past Kane. 6 months ago, a consultant named Scott Emerson joined the team. Slick suit, firm handshake, Stanford degree plastered all over his LinkedIn. He and Martin huddled in conference rooms, whispering when Kane walked by. 3 months ago, Kane noticed his administrative permissions being quietly adjusted. Nothing obvious, just subtle changes to what he could access. He could have raised the alarm, but instead he watched. He documented. He waited. You seem distracted lately, Emily said one evening as they sat on their porch. Is everything okay at work? Kane nodded, sipping his beer. Just changes. Nothing I haven't seen before. But it felt different. He was being pushed aside in meetings. Emails about system upgrades stopped coming his way. Younger team members were assigned projects he normally handled. It was all orchestrated. And then Kane found it. During a routine security scan, one of those background tasks no one else bothered with anymore. He saw unusual patterns in the financial software. Regular payments to a vendor he'd never heard of, Nova Strategic Solutions. A quick search showed it was registered just last year with a business address that led to a UPS store. The payment started small, but grew every month. Kane didn't say anything. He just copied the records and continued to watch. Kane spent the next week carefully going through every file he had access to. He worked from home, his dual-monitor setup now a window into the inner workings of Atlas Innovations. He was technically still on parole for another 2 weeks. Severance pay is part of his exit package. That gave him access to systems that should have been locked down. A lapse in judgment on Martin's part. Or maybe they simply didn't think he had the skill or motivation to do anything significant. He logged into financial systems first, cross-referencing transactions with internal project lists. Nova Strategic Solutions appeared on multiple invoices, often tied to vague project names like Infrastructure Upgrade or Data Integrity Initiative. But there were no corresponding work orders, no project managers assigned, and no tickets raised in the IT system. It was a shell, a front. Kane knew this kind of thing existed, but he'd never seen it so blatantly ignored. Either Martin was incredibly naive, or he wasn't on it. Kane's gut told. With each passing day, Kane mapped out the digital flow of money, connecting the dots between executive emails, financial authorizations, and system permissions. The deeper he dug, the more he found. Richard Parker, the CFO, had signed off on every payment, and Scott Emerson's name appeared on consulting agreements that never crossed Kane's desk. He searched through email backups. Emails most people didn't realize were still archived on Atlas's internal servers. Kane had set that up himself a decade ago during the last data compliance audit. Old habits die hard. He found messages between Scott and Martin, encrypted but poorly so. Kane cracked them in less than an hour using Scriptseed. Kane copied everything. Every email, every invoice, every chat log. He even found a trail leading back to offshore accounts registered under shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. The money trail was nearly perfect, but not quite. Martin had authorized payments during a period when he was on a corporate retreat with no electronic access. The signatures didn't match. The timestamps were inconsistent. Kane compiled it all. It was enough to destroy them. But it took him another 2 days to finalize his plan. He set up redundant backdoors into Atlas's primary servers, ones they wouldn't find without tearing down the entire architecture. They'd have to rip up the floors and gut the walls to find the hard lines he'd hidden over the years. His final act was to script and automate it. He didn't just want them exposed. He wanted them humiliated. Kane's parting gift would be a catastrophic implosion from within, undeniable, irreversible, and complete. He finalized on his last day. He sent a message to Martin. They pulled away from the curb, the building shrinking in the rear-view mirror. Kane watched it disappear with a calmness he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, he was free. Kane's days grew calmer after he left Atlas Innovations. He spent mornings at a local coffee shop, laptop open, browsing through news articles, and occasionally checking the timer on his program. He was 3 weeks away from launch, and everything remained secure. Emily had taken up gardening, a hobby she had always wanted to explore but never had the time for. Kane often joined her, pulling weeds and planting new flowers. For the first time in years, his hands were getting dirty with something other than circuit boards and Ethernet cables. They talked more about the future, about traveling, about things they'd put off for years. Emily knew he wasn't done. Not really. You look lighter, she. The clock was ticking, and so was the patience of Atlas Innovations. Rumors were spreading of restructuring, of deeper budget cuts, and whispers of an internal investigation. He knew it was far from nothing. Martin and Scott were tightening their grip. One evening, Kane received an email from an anonymous address. "We need to talk." The final week approached, and the night before the launch, Kane and Emily went out for dinner, a quiet Italian place they had. That night, Kane hardly slept. He sat at his desk in his home office, the room lit by the glow of his monitors. He checked everything one last time. Server stability, packet delivery schedules, encryption keys, and redundant triggers. At exactly midnight, the screen flashed green, a silent confirmation that the program was active and irreversible. In 12 hours, the first. Morning came, and so did the fallout. Kane awoke to dozens of notifications on his phone, news alerts, messages from old colleagues, and emails from unfamiliar addresses. He poured a cup of coffee, sat back in his chair, and opened his laptop. It was chaos. Atlas Innovations was trending, not just locally, but nationwide. The headlines read like victory banners. Major IT firm accused of embezzlement. Whistleblower exposes corruption at Atlas Innovations. Millions funneled through fake consultancy. Executives implicated. Kane scrolled through the articles, sipping his coffee as the world unraveled. Martin's face flashed across the screen, as did Scott Emerson's and Richard Parker's. They looked tired, blindsided, like men who had believed they were untouchable. Kane set his mug down and smiled. It wasn't just the exposure that mattered. It was the precision. The evidence was undeniable, layered, and verified by timestamps, digital signatures, and secure server. Atlas Innovations announced an emergency board meeting. Shareholders demanded answers. The SEC launched an investigation within hours. And Kane? He closed his laptop, walked outside, and joined Emily in the garden. The sun was bright. The flowers were blooming, and the world felt a little more honest. The fallout from Kane's revelations rippled through Atlas Innovations like a shockwave. Within hours of the documents going public, the company's stock plummeted. Investors scrambled to offload shares, and analysts began dissecting the information leaked to the press. Kane watched with mild amusement as news anchors speculated about how such a massive embezzlement scheme had gone unnoticed for so long. Words like systemic corruption, executive malfeasance, and whistleblower hero dominated the headlines. Martin, Scott, and Richard Parker were placed on immediate administrative leave, pending investigation. Nova Strategic Solutions collapsed overnight. Its registered offices in Hartford mysteriously shuttered, phones disconnected, and emails bouncing back with automated responses. Authorities began digging into the firm's financials, uncovering layers of shell corporations and offshore accounts, each more convoluted than the last. But Kane knew they'd never find the real roots. Those had been buried long before he even joined Atlas Innovations. What mattered now was that the public knew. That was enough. Kane expected a call from law enforcement, perhaps the SEC, maybe even the FBI. He'd prepared himself, secured his personal data, and even left encrypted packets of evidence with his lawyer, to be released only if anything happened to him. He wasn't naive. People who meddle with powerful men's money didn't always get a happy ending. But the call never came. Days passed, then weeks. Kane and Emily resumed their routine. Morning coffees, garden walks, dinners with Sophie when she visited from college. Life seemed almost normal. But Kane knew better than to believe in normal. One evening, as he was locking up the house, his phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Meet me. Haven Cafe. 9 p.m. Come alone. He stared at it for a moment, debating. Emily was out at her book club, and the house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Kane thought about ignoring it, but something in his gut told him not to. He slipped on his jacket, grabbed his car keys, and left. The Haven Cafe was nearly empty when he arrived. A waitress behind the counter gave him a nod, and he took a seat near the window, his back to the wall. He didn't order anything. He didn't need to. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Kane began to think it was a setup. Maybe some wild goose chase meant to spook him. But then the bell above the door chimed, and a tall man in a charcoal gray suit walked in. He scanned the room, spotted Kane, and approached with a confident stride. "Mr. Morgan," the man said, extending a hand. Kane didn't shake it. The man didn't seem bothered. He sat down across from him, unbuttoning his jacket. "You don't know me, but I know you," the man continued. "Name's Collins. Let's just say I work for people who are very interested in what you've done." Kane leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Which part? The garden work or the corporate takedown?" Collins smiled, a thin, practiced gesture. "The latter," he replied. Collins pulled a small tablet from his jacket and placed it on the table, swiping to unlock it. He turned it to face Kane. On the screen were detailed financial records, not just of Atlas Innovations, but of other firms as well. Companies Kane recognized: Orion Data Solutions, Hartman Financial Group, and even Haven Consulting Group. "You didn't think Atlas was the only one, did you?" Collins asked, tapping the screen. Your little stunt set off a chain reaction. The SEC started poking around, and guess what they found? This is bigger than Atlas. Much bigger. Kane's eyes scanned the screen, his mind racing. He had thought his work was done, that his piece of justice had been served. But this was something else. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked, his voice steady. Collins leaned in, folding his hands on the table. "Because you clearly know how to find things. And my employers think you might want to keep going. You've already done half the work. Why not finish the job?" Kane laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You think I'm just going to jump back into that world? I did my part. Atlas is done. I'm done." Collins raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Are you?" he asked. He slid a business card across the table. It was blank, save for a phone number embossed in silver. "Call me when you change your mind," he said. Standing up, "We'll be in touch." Kane watched him leave, the door chiming softly as it swung shut. He looked down at the card, turning it over in his hands. It was heavier than he expected, the kind of cardstock reserved for people who didn't expect to be ignored. Kane slipped it into his pocket and sat there for a while, watching the rain begin to patter against the cafe windows. When he finally stood to leave, the waitress gave him a polite nod. "Need anything else?" she asked. Kane shook his head, his mind miles away. "No, I think I have everything I need," he replied, pushing open the door and stepping into the rain. As he walked back to his car, the streetlights casting long shadows across the wet pavement, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that something far bigger was unfolding. Something he'd only glimpsed the edges of. Atlas was just the beginning. And now, for better or worse, he was part of it. Kane's preparations were meticulous. He knew that what he had uncovered was explosive, and the fallout would be immense. His final task was to ensure everything was airtight. No loose ends, no overlooked details. He spent hours combing through the backups, encrypting sensitive information, and organizing the evidence in a way that would be undeniable to anyone who saw it. Emily watched him work, the concern in her eyes clear, but she said nothing. She knew him well enough to understand that there was no turning back now. The night before the board meeting, Kane sat on his porch, a cold wind brushing past him, stirring the leaves that had begun to pile along the edges of the lawn. He sipped his coffee slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Are you ready for this?" Emily asked, joining him outside, her hand slipping into his. He nodded. "I've been ready for a long time. Tomorrow, they'll understand what real accountability looks like." Morning arrived with an unseasonable chill. Kane dressed sharply, pulling his coat tight as he stepped out into the brisk air. The drive to Atlas Innovations felt surreal, almost dreamlike. It was the same path he'd driven for nearly 2 decades, but now it was different. Now it had purpose. He parked across the street, just as he always did. But this time he wasn't going in. He waited, watching as the building came alive with the day's activity. Employees shuffled in, oblivious to what was about to unfold. At exactly 9 a.m., Kane pressed send. His meticulously crafted report, complete with financial discrepancies, email logs, and documented conversations, was delivered simultaneously to every member of the board, legal counsel, and select members of Atlas Innovations' executive team. Within minutes, phones started buzzing, emails were opened, and the storm he had set in motion began to unravel. Kane leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. The hardest part was done. Now, it was only a matter of time. For the first time in weeks, he felt something unfamiliar. Peace. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of it all drift away, knowing that sometimes justice wasn't about fighting harder. It was about fighting smarter. With a final glance at the towering glass structure of Atlas Innovations, Kane started his car and drove away, leaving the chaos behind. He knew they'd call. He knew they'd try to clean up the mess. But this time, there would be no cover-up, no sweeping things under the rug. This time, the truth was out in the open, and there was no turning back. Sometimes, Kane thought as he merged onto the freeway, you don't have to burn the whole house down. Sometimes you just have to pull the right thread and watch it all come undone.